Isn't that amazing? Flying in the Alps, it's so beautiful. So today I will show you my experience doing paragliding in the Alps, but not only with, let's say, a dual flight and doing some fun tricks here, but also explaining you a bit my experience with learning it myself, doing it myself, because that's actually my ultimate goal, to not be dependent on, let's say, one person flying for you and you just going along with the ride, but also me learning it myself. So as you can see here, I'm actually flying also myself, which shows you that actually it's not as difficult as you would think. So myself, I have done quite some flights, maybe 10 plus flights, and I do it actually in Netherlands, where you can do this type of flying, but not obviously in the Alps, but with a cable. So they pull you with a cable, the same effect as you would have from jumping from a mountain. You will catch some air, and at certain point, being a couple of 100 meters high, they would release the cable, and then you will be able to fly down and enjoy the ride. Obviously in the Netherlands it would take maybe a couple of minutes. Here in the mountains you have a bit more chance of having hot air, and hot air, like tubes of hot air that push you up, will allow you to fly longer. And also the sheer fact that you jump off from, what is it, 2000-meter high, you will be way higher than you will ever be able to do with, let's say, a cable. So one thing I really enjoy about is the view, obviously. So doing it in the Alps, doing ski season, the white, the green and the blue colors are one of the most amazing colors to have. And also you can bring your ski, so you can land here, and if you do it correctly you can cruise along. I tripped a bit here, but it was good fun anyway. But one of the things I actually found quite interesting is the fact that you can do this quite easy. So I never knew that paragliding would not be that challenging. Actually, the flying itself is not too challenging. The most challenging part is actually the starting point, which I will show a bit later in the video, but that's the most challenging. Actually, the flying itself is quite smooth. You don't really have any bumps, especially if the weather is quite normal. And that's also a bit the main conclusion for me. If you are flying paragliding, it's not difficult at all, and as the main difficulty will be knowing a bit physics of what you're actually doing. So knowing how to land, how you should pull the two cords, because there's only two cords really you should pull or drag to the left or to the right. So it's not that difficult. You just have to be a bit aware that you really should pull, because doing some little centimeter changes to the cords will not change your direction. That's also something the teacher is showing me in this video, that you should pull really hard. But it is fun, right? So it's easy. The landing and the starting are the most difficult part, which you can actually, as I said, learn quite easily, not in the mountains, but just learn it also on flat ground, which I did in Netherlands. And then I assume if you have more than 50 flights or something under your belt, you feel comfortable yourself and you could jump off any mountain, which is actually one of my goals. The idea of just being able to jump off any mountain and fly wherever you want is obviously one of the key things which is important in one's human life, is having the ultimate freedom there. And obviously also being safe. It's important to be safe and to feel safe yourself, because as I said, it's not difficult to fly, but the difficulty will be in knowing how to react in certain situations which you cannot always predict. And here is the starting point, and that's actually the most difficult one, getting the paraglider up and keeping it up above your head and not making it go any direction in front of you, in the back of you, to the left or to the right, because especially here when you start flying you don't have a lot of room for error. But you're, at least here when you go skiing, you are not falling off a giant cliff, which is actually very nice. You do have some room for error. It's not a big drop down. And one of the things I wanted to discuss also in this video is the fact that flying is one of those things, at least individual flight is something which is not yet really scaled up or democratized in a big way. Doing paragliding, doing any type of 2 or 3 or 4 person jet flying is obviously for the elite of the people. So Doing paragliding is a relatively cheap endeavor. You can count for at least maybe an hour of flight, €50, or maybe half an hour is €50. So training and getting the material is relatively cheap. Even the paraglider itself, I think the whole setup for 2-3 thousand you can get it, which are rookie prices if you compare it to a lot of the other types of flight types you can do and the investment you need to make there. So doing these flights here is very affordable, but as you can see, I'm pretty much alone here in the mountains, so there must be a reason why. And the big reason is probably that a lot of people are still scared of it, because it is still flying with a very little piece of plastic above your head where you put your life and trust into. But it is also a very smooth ride, and something you maybe forget is the fact that actually I'm flying with 2 people in one go, and we cover a lot of distance, and that's something we actually take for granted. But if we look at cars, we always think, okay, we need to have at least 5 seats, and then you go to reality and you notice that most of the time you're either alone or with 2 people. So it is not something which is actually that bad to only being able to fly 2 people, which is actually more than 1 people, which is actually pretty nice. And I think because it's quite easy to learn, it has a lot of potential, and maybe there's some more efficient way to do it. One thing I really found interesting is the fact that people are doing wing foiling. You have, let's say, the foil in the water, but also you have a wing above your head, let's say, which allows you to do wing foiling and doing some kind of also catching the wind. And I do really want to use that wing foiling maybe in the mountains. I think it would be amazing to do while skiing, and I have not seen it. But I'm just discussing some different things you can use to fly, and the main issue with paragliding is the fact that you are dependent on the wind and the hot air, especially to keep longer distance. So the hot air, how it works is obviously hot air goes up, and if your paraglider catches this hot wind, you can really keep flying for a long time, and even you can decide yourself when you go down. That's something people forget. They think you jump off a mountain and you fall down and you don't really have a lot of room to fly. You can actually go quite high and stay up for a long time, which is very fun. But the main issue there is indeed you can go to the mountains and have a whole week of not being able to do the flying. So one solution there would be the fact that you can add a para motor, so a paragliding motor, to this whole setup, where you have either some blades which push you forward and push you up based on, let's say, a diesel motor. You could argue there's maybe an option to make it even more green, if you call it green, is to have the battery in there, but the battery weighs way more than let's say a couple of liters of diesel. So there the diesel will always win, but maybe you need some green diesel if you want to be staying in the green way of doing things. But anyway, the para motor will allow you to fly way longer and cover way more distance, and there's actually some YouTubers who have a whole channel based on that. But I find it such an interesting setup because it is quite easy to set up, and technically you could also do it with 2, and maybe it will also allow you to cover more distance because of paramotor than doing it with 2 without a paramotor. So I'm really curious how flying will evolve, because we have seen how drones have really evolved over the last couple of years. So it is an interesting area to take into consideration, and you could see the opportunity in the air, because in the air you can go anywhere. You don't need a road. Obviously there's some safety concerns, but on land you are limited by the road built for you, at least which my car can do. I don't have a 4x4, so you need to follow the road. So you are actually not free to do whatever you want. If you're flying, you can go anywhere you want, and that's, I think, the ultimate freedom which flying allows you to do. And it is relatively easy, and yes, it is maybe not a natural habitat of humans, like the ocean is not our natural habitat. We like to live and be on, let's say, solid ground, so it will be a challenge to, let's say, adapt to it. But I truly believe there's a lot of opportunity to increase individual transport And we are obviously blessed by the aviation industry, which has democratized flying all over the world and allows us all to discover these amazing places around this planet. And that's something we should never go back on. You should never tax or decrease the fact that we have these amazing technologies. It is something you should sustain and grow and allow everyone to access. So by increasing prices on flying, that would be the most stupid thing to do. You can reinvest some of that money in looking how can we make it more green, because there's one thing for sure: traveling over land with more efficient transport is more green, let's say ecological, than flying with an airplane. Anyway, here I'm supposed to land with my snowboard, which is another advantage. You can take your snowboard and still do the flying. And the landing was not as smooth as I hoped. I lost a bit my balance, which led us to fall a bit, or at least paraglide. So thank you and see you next time. Bye bye.